What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Origins Remastered, Revamped and brought back to you once more. Today we're covering the Squirtle evolution line, the final evolution line from the Kanto starters, and starting next episode we'll look at some more Kanto Pokemon, so be sure to suggest some more you want to see in the future, whether they're Kanto or not. Kanto are going to get covered first though, so let me know what you want to see down below, and they might get covered in future episodes of Pokemon Origins. But for now, let's look at the Squirtle evolution line. So, Squirtle. Its Japanese name is Zenigame. It is the tiny turtle Pokemon and is a pure water type. It's number 7 in the National Pokédex, coming after, obviously, Bulbasaur and Charmander's lines, respectively, and stands at 0.5 meters or 1 foot 8 inches and weighs 9 kilograms or 19.8 pounds. Taking a quick look at its models from Generation 6, you can see the regular model there and the shiny model. You can see when it goes shiny, it gets sort of lighter blue skin, pale light blue skin. Its sort of underbelly of the shell becomes a sort of a really light cream. Its normal colour is cream, but it becomes really light. Its shell becomes a green, actually. You can't see it on the model, but it does. And its eyes go from sort of the mid purple, red, purpley, pinky colour sort of thing to more of a lighter one as well. So generally, it lightens up basically, and its shell becomes green. Being a starter Pokemon, Squirtle evolves into its first, or the second stage in its evolution chain, which is Wartortle, starting at level 16, so pretty early on. So, Squirtle is a blue turtle-like Pokemon. It has a shell that encases its main body, so all its organs and stuff are sort of encased inside the shell, probably under a layer of skin as well, so the shell is just like sort of an extra bit of covering. It has a brown back on this shell and a cream underside, as I mentioned just now, and it has a white line that divides the two, sort of just running down between its, from its arms to its legs sort of thing. Its small arms and legs pop in and out whenever it wants, as well as a bushy blue tail from the back. We're told it's actually a bushy tail. It looks like it just be sort of a flat, sort of a smooth tail, but it's actually bushy. It actually has sort of fur on it. How long this fur is, we don't know, but certainly when we get onto Wartortle, we'll talk more about that. Squirtle also has a small head with a beak-like mouth, so you can see its mouth comes around and there's a little jut at the bottom of it, sort of looks like a beak, with these two lines for its nose, above it there, and pinky purpley eye colour, as I said. So generally Squirtle is your generic turtle. It looks very similar to a turtle, but as we'll look at in the origin in a minute, there are some other aspects introduced or implemented into it. So, Pokédex entries for Squirtle. We're told that the shell is not present at birth, okay? So, it's not like it hatches from the egg. Birth, egg, it was a bit sort of misty, bit fog and misty, get it? Puns. It was a bit sort of just blurry how Pokemon are reproduced in Generation 1, but birth, hatching from an egg sort of thing. But it's not present at birth. Instead, its back swells and hardens. So originally, when you first have a Squirtle hatch, it's just a little weakling, I guess, but then its main body hardens up and this shell forms around it, which protects it. Other entries in the Pokédex, however, say that the shell is soft upon birth, so instead of having no shell at all, it's just sort of a soft shell and then it hardens up. We don't really know because, Pokédex entries contradict each other quite a lot. We're then told when the shell eventually gets hard, prodding fingers bounce off. Now, I wouldn't expect them to properly bounce off, but it means, you can't prod it. You can't prod the shell. It's not going to be soft. It's a hard shell. You can't poke into it. You're just going to be. It's like having. Well, it's like any shell. A tortoise shell or a turtle shell in real life. You're not going to be able to poke your finger into it. It's a pretty hard, sort of sturdy thing. We're told Squirtle will withdraw inside this shell, withdraw being one of its moves it can learn fairly early on, when it's threatened, so that's how it raises its defense basically. It gets its head, its arms, and its tail inside the shell, and obviously you can't really hurt it unless if it's inside there. In terms of how it actually gets all these body parts inside the shell, we don't know how big its body is inside there, but we got to assume it's fairly sturdy just to actually support the weight of the shell, so getting both that, along with the arms and the legs, the tail and the head. The head, it's almost as wide as the shell itself. How is the head going to get inside? We really don't know, but that's just a sort of like a bit of a hiccup in Squirtle's design. Maybe it can't, maybe it can't bring its head in. Who knows? I don't know. Now, this actually helps minimise resistance in water because obviously if it can bring its legs in, or maybe it's just maybe its arms in, maybe it doesn't need to use its arms for swimming, it can use its legs. That's going to be less surface area, so the water is going to get past quicker, and you're going to swim through the water faster basically. As such, Squirtle can swim at pretty high speeds as well, so it's a certainly fast Pokemon. Squirtle can also spray water from its mouth. How, we don't know, in terms of biology, we don't really know. Or squirt water from its shell. So basically any opening in its shell, including the mouth, can have water shot out of it. So maybe there's just a sort of a store of water inside the shell, and maybe, you know, between the shell and the main body, something along those lines, and it can just harness that water whenever it wants. Who knows, you know, Pokemon are mysterious things. So the origin of Squirtle, the basis, where did it come from the real world? Well, as I mentioned, it's based on a turtle and also a tortoise, both being very similar creatures themselves, except tortoise, I think all tortoise are land creatures. There might be one or two that maybe are water based, I'm not sure. I'm no expert on turtles and tortoises, but basically tortoises are on land, turtles are in water. Some turtles you find in the sea, I'm pretty sure there's some river turtles as well. But yeah, turtles in the water, tortoise in the sea. So mainly turtle, but also has some tortoise-like features as well. The fact that, you know, it can sort of move around on land. Whereas turtles on land, they sort of just have to flap about because their arms and legs aren't strong or, you know, built enough. Since, as I said, since it was a water type, it's most likely a sea turtle. It could also be a river turtle, I suppose, but, you know. And both animals are born with soft shells. Both turtles and tortoises are born with soft shells, which harden up. So they both have shells on birth, so I guess that's sort of the Pokédex entry sort of lean towards, more than them not having shells at all. They have shells that is pretty darn soft. But that's basically the inspiration for Squirtle. There's not much else there. There's also the fact that its tail might be based on a squirrel's tail, because it sort of looks a bit like a squirrel's tail, and that also might link to its name, as we'll look at in a second. So its Japanese name is Zenigame, which is the Japanese word for pond turtle. So, you know, fair enough, it's pond turtle, that's fair enough. But according to PokeQuiz, which was, I think, a little series run, just I think after, instead of Who's That Pokemon, it was run after episodes just looking over the names of Pokemon. Apparently, Zenny is an old word for money, and apparently the Squirtle shells look like old coins. Don't ask me. And then Game means turtle, so maybe, you know, who knows, but it's also the Japanese word for pond turtle, so that's generally the one I go by. The English name, Squirtle, is a combination of squirt and turtle. Turtle being its basis, and squirt, you know, we've been told it can squirt more water out of its mouth and out of its shell. However, it could also be a combination of squirrel and turtle, because, as I mentioned, Squirtle's tail does look a bit like a squirrel's tail, with the sort of the curl up, and as well, we've been told it's furry. Squirrels' tails, they are furry as well. They sort of have hair on them, but it's not like proper hair. There's the main sort of tail bit, and then the hair just comes off the edge. So maybe Squirtle's tail is like that, and that's the basis from there. So either Squirt and Turtle or Squirrel and Turtle, I would say, is the basis for Squirtle. Then, before we move on, let's take a quick look at Squirtle's size. It stands at 0.5 meters or 1 foot 8 inches, which makes it pretty small actually when you look at it. Comparing it to Ash and myself, you can see it comes up just over Ash's knee and just pretty much to my knee there. So it's bigger than any turtle, well, not really bigger than any turtle or tortoise, but of course they wouldn't be stood up. But it's about the same size as a small dog standing up. So, and obviously it can shoot water, so it's not a huge Pokemon, it's not really powerful Pokemon, but it's still big enough to actually do some damage, I guess. Anyway, that's going to be it for Squirtle, so let's move on to look at Squirtle's evolution, as I mentioned earlier, which is Wartortle. Wartortle's Japanese name is Kameru, or spelled Camille, or something like that, who knows. It's the turtle Pokemon, so going from tiny to just a turtle now, and is a pure water type once more, and it's number 8 in the National Pokédex, coming after Squirtle. It stands now at 1 meter or 3 foot 3 inches, so it's doubled in height, and it weighs 22.5 kilograms or 49.6 pounds. Looking at its models from Generation 6, you can see the regular and shiny models there for Wartortle. Now, instead of getting lighter when it becomes shiny, it gets darker in terms of its skin colour. Its chest gets a dark brown, or sort of a lighty mid-brown sort of thing, and its shell also becomes a greeny colour. As well as its ears and its tail also getting sort of a green tinge to them, a very light green, maybe even like greeny aqua tinge to them as well, whereas normal Wartortle's ears are sort of just like bluey white. As I mentioned earlier, you'll get your Squirtle evolving to a Wartortle starting level 16, and then Wartortle will evolve onto Blastoise starting level 36, as with most starter Pokemon in general. So, Wartortle is a medium-sized Pokemon and is also a turtle-like Pokemon, as sort of very similar to Squirtle, just a bit bigger. Its shell has gotten slightly paler on the back, along with the chest section now being a bit lighter as well, and it now has feather-like ears, whereas Squirtle didn't really have any discernible ears. Wartortle has these big feather-like ears, almost like feathers, but they are ears, along with a bushy feather-like tail, as you can see coming out from its behind. Its fingers also now have small stubby claws, as you can see, whereas Squirtle's didn't have any anywhere, and its eyes are now a darker sort of almost purpley brown colour, whereas Squirtle's a purple pink, now we have a purple brown colour. You can also see two sort of almost blush marks on its cheeks where it has a darker purplish tinge to them. But that's really sort of it. You can see just at the top of its shell, if you look at the Sugimori art there, is the black section. This, who knows, this, maybe it's sort of its inner body is a black colour, or maybe this is just the fact that it's showing it's inside the shell. Who knows? Maybe there's loads of space in there and it's all dark in there. Who knows? We don't know, but that's what we can see there. And that's the basic sort of description design for Wartortle. Looking at some Pokédex entries for it, we find that it hides in water to stalk its prey, so we can assume the Squirtle, or the whole, or Wartortle at least, is a carnivorous being because it stalks prey. Maybe that prey is just sort of small animals or small Pokemon, who knows? Who knows? And it can use its ears and tail to maintain balance as it swims through the water. So that's sort of one of the purposes of having the ears and the tail as well. As well as this, it can store air in its fur, and this fur is the fur in its ears and also the fur in its tail, to breathe underwater, so this can extend the time it's underwater for, so it can sort of, I guess, hunt fish if it eats them, of course, but who knows. Its shell can also end up with algae growing on it, because obviously if it's spending a lot of time in water, there are going to be sort of, little algae stuff sitting on it and ending up sort of just covering the shell. So I guess it can show Wartortle's age and show how old it is, because the longer it's going to, the longer it's lived for, the longer it's been in the water, the more algae it's going to have. Its tail also grows deeper in colour as it ages, so maybe it goes from sort of this light blue hair to a sort of darker blue, or maybe just a more disgusting blue, who knows. And it's said to live 10,000 years, which is pretty old. Generally we don't hear about Pokemon dying of old age too often, but generally we'd assume Pokemon have similar lifespans. Maybe a few of them had, like, I guess Rayquaza, legendaries in general are going to have long lifespans, but who knows, maybe Pokemon just live for forever or live for a long time. As I said, 10,000 years. Maybe all Pokemon live for 10,000 years. Who knows? And because Wartortle lives so long, it's said to be a symbol of longevity. So maybe not every Pokemon lives this long, but you guys get the idea. Similar longevity, so similar long life. Also for Wartortle, a scratched shell is evidence of its toughness, because obviously if it's been in some battles, eventually it's going to withdraw into its shell, and that's going to get hit by, whatever, blades and everything. So a scratched shell is going to show how tough it is. So the origin of Wartortle, what's it based on, where does its design come from, etc. It's very much the same as Squirtle, sea turtle with some features of tortoises, but there's a bit more to Wartortle than sort of meets the eye. It's not just a turtle / tortoise. Its tail, this long feathery tail, is a reference to legends of the Minogame, which was a turtle that lived for over 10,000 years, hence its Pokédex entries talking about 10,000 years as well, and had a tail made of seaweed, very similar to our feathery tail we have here. And also its ability to store air in this tail to breathe from may be a reference or a link to some turtles which can breathe through their cloaca near their tail, so some turtles can sort of breathe in air there as well as breathing it in through their mouth. But that's sort of, similar but a bit different. But that's generally the basis for Wartortle, about this Minogame, this legendary turtle that lived for over 10,000 years and had a tail made of seaweed. Very interesting indeed. And now if you look at Wartortle's name, so its Japanese name, Kameru, is a combination of Kame and tail, which is Eru. So basically, Kame and tail. Kame is Japanese for turtle, so turtle tail. Maybe, who knows. It can also be a corruption of Kameru, which is pretty much spelled, or is that Kameru is how you say it. Kameru is Kameru, sort of thing, just a corruption with it, a slightly changed character, so the sound changes as well. And this means to be able to bite, so maybe something to do with its jaw. Again, it sort of has that little beak-like jaw that Squirtle has, so maybe there. Its English name, Wartortle, is a combination of war or warrior, tortoise and turtle, because you have war, tor, and then the tull from turtle. So there's a nice triple combination there. War or warrior, it depends. It might be something else as well. Maybe water, just sort of, because some people say water and some people say water. So maybe it comes from there as well. Who knows? But war or warrior would fit as well, because we talked about the scratch shell and how that shows its toughness in battle. And then quickly looking at another of Wartortle's names, this time its German name, we have Shilok. I think I'm saying that right. I've never done German, so please don't judge. Shilok, which is a combination of Schildkröte, I think is how I say that, I'm not sure, which actually is German for both turtle and tortoise, so, you know, both of those, and also Lock, or however you would say that in a German accent, which means to curl, or curl. So this is a reference to how it, you know, can withdraw into a shell and sort of, I guess, curl up into a ball there. So turtle curl, or you know, sort of along those lines there. I just thought I'd look at another of those names because it's quite interesting. And then finally for Wartortle, if we take a quick look at its size, as I said earlier, it doubles in height from Squirtle, so it's now 1 meter tall. So it comes up just under Ash's chest and sort of just to my sort of, I guess, stomach line. And it's pretty big now, it's pretty big. You wouldn't want to mess with Wartortle right now, especially if you're its prey. Don't mess with that thing, it's pretty big and bulky actually, especially if it goes into that shell, because you're not going to do any damage to it at all. So that's it for Wartortle. Now let's move on to the final evolution for this chain, which is Blastoise. So Blastoise's Japanese name is Kamex, it is the shellfish Pokemon, and is a pure water type. It's number 9 in the National Pokédex, coming after Wartortle, and stands at 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighs 85.5 kilograms or 188.5 pounds. Looking at the models from Generation 6 here, you can see Blastoise is a pretty darn bulky Pokemon, and its shiny form has a dark green shell, sort of a purpley pinky coloured skin almost. Its chest is pretty much the same colour, so really the only change is in the shell and the skin colour, as well as the eyes as well. I think the eyes are a nice green colour. So, Blastoise is a large, bulky, bipedal turtle Pokemon thing, and as you can see, its shell has grown much larger, and its body in general has grown much larger, but the shell generally has grown much larger, covering the whole back, and it now has 2 cannons protruding from it, both sort of over its shoulders almost. Its arms and legs have also become bulkier, almost sort of like the muscle man, the tire man, I can't remember his name, sort of around its arms, lots of muscle there. It has large splayed claws on its toes, as well as these other claws it has on its hands anyway. It's lost the feathery ears and tail from Wartortle, because it doesn't need them anymore, because we can assume, you know, it's now not really hunting prey anymore. It can use its cannons to hunt prey. It doesn't actually have to, you know, swim through the water and whatnot. And its tail, as well as both its ears and its tail, both become much stubbier. The tail just sort of comes out the bottom there, it's nothing too special, and the ears are just there, I guess, but at least it has ears. Its eyes have also become a brownish colour rather than sort of the purple brown they were. They're now pure brown, pretty much the same colour as what is on its shell. So the Pokédex entries for Blastoise, we find out that it is a brutal Pokemon. It's not nice like Squirtle or Wartortle, it's a brutal Pokemon, okay? It's nasty. It uses the cannons on its back to blast out water, and also uses them to sort of boost up its high speed tackle, so we can assume it's sort of maybe it can, I don't know really, maybe it can shoot water out the back of them too, or turn its cannons around slightly just to make itself move faster, who knows. But we're told the water blasts can punch through steel and hits anything accurately at over 160 feet, which is a darn long distance. So don't be challenging Blastoise, it can hit you with those cannons pretty well. It can also crush opponents with its weight, as well as withdrawing into its shell to protect itself from battle. So it can just crush you, it can shoot water at you, it can go through steel, it can withdraw into its shell so you can't actually do any damage to it. It's a monster. Blastoise is a monster. So then, looking at the origin, looking at the design for Blastoise, you know, again, it's a turtle-tortoise mixture. Try saying that a few times when you're drunk. Turtle-tortoise mixture. So mainly, maybe a few more tortoise features coming in now, because it's a bit bulkier, so you know it's moving around on land. You generally aren't going to see Blastoise swimming around as much as you would Squirtle or Wartortle. It's going to be on land most of the time, and it's a lot heavier, as most tortoises are. Blastoise also has aspects of a tank though, particularly the cannons, and these cannons may have been derived from functioning tubes found in some mussels or shellfish, and hence Blastoise's species name, which is the shellfish Pokemon. Some mussel shellfish have functioning tubes just sort of running through it, so you know, maybe can squirt water out and whatnot, so maybe the sort of inspiration for those come from there, or maybe just from the tanks having cannons and stuff like that, as we look at in the naming in a second. So, its Japanese name is Kamex, which is a combination of Kame, as we discussed already, which means turtle, and Max. So, sort of, it's the last evolution in the chain, it's the maximum evolution, maximum turtle, you know, biggest turtle, best turtle, whatever you want to use to describe that. That's fairly simple there. And the naming Blastoise is a combination of blast and tortoise. So, as I said, maybe a few more inspiration from tortoises than turtles here, since it's actually in the name as well, toise. Blast and toise. Blast, just talking about the cannons really, because that's its main sort of, I don't know, method of attacking, I guess you could say. Then, if we look at the size of Blastoise before we move on to Mega Blastoise, you can see it's now the same height as Ash, and it's pretty darn bulky. If that's its height, look at its width. It's wider than me. Well, obviously it's going to be wider than me, you guys get the idea. It's a pretty big Pokemon, especially those cannons. You don't want to mess with Blastoise. Please, guys, don't mess with Blastoise. It'll just crush you. It will just crush you, you know, get out close quarters, you think you've got it? Nah, it's just going to crush you. It'll sit on you, and it'll win. That's how Blastoise works. It's going to sit on you. Yes, indeed. Anyway, let's move on. As I'm sure you know, Blastoise has a Mega Evolution, so let's move on to that. Mega Blastoise. Again, in terms of sort of typing, it's the same typing, pure water. Its height and weight. Height stays the same at 1.6, 5 foot 3 inches, but its weight goes up to 101.1 kilograms or 222.9 pounds, so it gets a lot heavier, or a good amount heavier at least. Looking at the models from Generation 6, you can see, in terms of shiny, its shell areas might be a bit lighter green than normal Blastoise, but generally it's the same, you know, sort of a more deep cream coloured chest as well, whereas its body is, you know, again, the same sort of purple as usual. And obviously to evolve Blastoise into Mega Blastoise, you need your Blastoisinite, and of course a Mega Ring or, you know, whatever Mega item you would like to use. So, Mega Blastoise, its body has become larger and more hunched over thanks to a large, big main cannon in the middle of its back, and you can see it just sort of comes right out of the back. It also has smaller cannons on each wrist and shell-like coverings on its arms or wrists or hands or whatever you want to refer to those as. As well as this, it has a spike-like jut coming out the base of its jaw, as you can see there, whereas it didn't have that in its previous. It's just sort of come out just as an extra design feature. And rather than its eyes being brown, they've now become a bright red colour, so, you know, take from that what you will, you know, maybe it's just even more brutal now, whereas the brown was more of a complacent colour, the red is sort of evil. Mega Blastoise is evil, I don't know, but that's really Mega Blastoise there. As you can see, the biggest addition is the huge cannon on its back and the cannons on its wrists. And obviously it makes it even easier for you to shoot to you, because it's got a huge one on its back, so it doesn't have to turn, and then just two small ones on its wrists it can fire out at the same time. So really, don't mess with a Blastoise, guys, that'd be my advice. Looking at the size, since the height really hasn't changed, I had to gorge, because obviously it's more hunched over, so I imagined if it was stood up still and just sort of, you know, compared the features. So the 1.6 meters is sort of measured, I guess, from the top of its white lining of the shell. It seems to be the most accurate thing, but it's sort of what it would be like if it was stood up. But with the cannon there, it makes it a whole lot bigger, a whole lot heavier, and as I said, don't mess with a Blastoise. Please don't mess with Mega Blastoise, just don't do it. But that's really it. We covered Squirtle, Wartortle, Blastoise, and Mega Blastoise, and that's going to be it for this episode of Pokemon Origins, guys. As I said at the start, be sure to suggest some more Pokemon for me to cover in future episodes down below. But for now, this is going to be it for me for today. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.